coaches, tech is no longer enough. Understanding the ins and outs, the technical, tactical aspects of your sport, that's a great place to start with your coaching, but it's no longer enough. Modern coaching in this new challenging world that we're living in is about behaviors. It's about helping athletes to feel empowered to make their own decisions so that they can exhibit the behaviors you're looking for out there on the field or the pitch. That's why we called this podcast Don't Tell Me, Show Me. And this week we've got a special guest. Neil Hull is joining us. Neil is a veteran coach from London via San Antonio, who's going to take us through the ins and outs of executing decision-making under pressure in practices, in games. This is a real practical episode. If you want to go beyond tech, then this episode is for you. Right, Neil, thanks for joining me. Look, can you just help us out for the listeners? Just run through your track record. I mean, it might take the rest of the episode, so try to distill it down as best you can, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of coaching.
Yeah, well, first of all, kindly thank you for inviting me on. It's a great honor just to chat and get the message. I've been following you guys since the beginning, since the YouTube days, and Mark has been kind enough to present to our university class a couple of times. So that sort of joins into us. But like the journey really is, it's a similar journey to Mark's, a very parallel journey to Mark's, but we never actually met while serving. We were both in the British Army. I joined as a sapper at 16 and left home to go and do what you do in the military. And then as time rolled through, I got selected into the Army Physical Training Corps. And that's kind of one of the most elite corps, regiments in the Army, and specialized regiments. There's only sort of 300 of us, and we're in charge of the physical training and the adventurous training, the life-threatening training that goes on with the other soldiers. So I transferred into there in the 90s, and then came over here to the US in 95, met my wife, and thought, I don't think I'm going to meet another woman as good as this in my life. 30 years later, I think that was a good decision. You know, life's about the decisions we make, isn't it? We're all given the same opportunity and the same choice, but do we choose to take it? And I think that's kind of like the sliding door moment you get, and that comes into coaching as well. And then coming into San Antonio, I got into the soccer world, the football world, and started coaching over here, rolling around the country from Texas up to DC to New England, over to California, working the whole spectrum here. Connected with a group that was then called the National Soccer Coaches Association of America, the largest coaching body in the world. And now they call United Soccer Coaches, but I became a member of their national staff, educating coaches, so teaching coaches how to coach. And that's really reflective and enlightening. You're teaching players and rolling into players. And I think in the early years, it was a lot of telling and not listening. But then suddenly, when you start coaching coaches, every day is an oral exam, and they're questioning you and they're asking you and they're digging deeper into your knowledge. And I think that's where, quoting knowledge, we all have opinion, but eventually opinion turns into knowledge, which as you're getting older finds its way to wisdom. Now, we can't say whether we're the wise old owl or not, but I think the people that look up to us and we look up to from below can support that. And none of us have all the answers. And so then I started my own academy, the Pass Academy here in Texas, and just working on the technical, tactical game, growing them, but realizing all the troubles weren't technical, tactical with these players. They can all dribble balls. They can all strike balls. I'm not shooting enough, coach. Okay, well, why are you not shooting enough? And that was a question I struggled to answer. And then coming back onto a few previous episodes, it goes down to the principles. If I'm not principle based, what system do I have to lean on, to learn from, to grow from? And so if I'm system based, I'll have the values and I'll have an area to reflect back on. And then we come into these principles. I believe the reason you're not shooting enough is because you're not having that first thought in your head, can I shoot? If a coach is putting that first thought in your head, can I pass? Then there's no way you're going to shoot. Mm-hmm. So you've got to go with the mentality and the thought process and the behaviors to achieve that. Now, how do we transfer that? And that's where sort of Mark came in. I listened to a podcast, and suddenly he joined the Army at 16. He went to commando training school. And we're both in the Army Physical Training Corps together. But we never actually met. We served together for about 3 years, but we never met. And he came over to here, to Maryland, and I'm like talking to him through Twitter, I think it was. Mark, I want to get on your course. I want to come over. I want to be on it. And he's like, you got to go to ask the people that are hosting the course. So I went to another gentleman to kind of come up with a friend, and myself and a guy called Alan Ewing went to see Mark. And it, like you said, the epiphany, and it changed things. It gave you this perspective, but I think greater than a perspective, it gave you the connection. And it's sometimes, now I'm in a university environment, it's sometimes not the grades you make, it's the hands you shake. And that can really help us. And we all need these mentors. We all need people that support. And so, yeah, I mean, that's the base of the journey. So now we try to roll the academy a lot on behaviors, which is tough because that's now accountability. And often people struggle with that. And in our world, I believe we can roll the players because they're very growth mindset, very spongy. The hard one is allowing the parent giving open permission to the player to grow, because they don't want to see their son or daughter struggle a lot of the time. So then that accountability where it's a growth factor, it becomes an inhibitory factor for some of the external influences connected to that player.
Yeah. Hey, can I pull on a couple of threads there, Neil? So firstly, for any coaches listening to this podcast for the very first time, my colleague Mark Bennett usually joins me, and he'll arrange this this interview here with Neil. But unfortunately, he's just had personal circumstances, just very, very unlike Mark, to miss a commitment. So he's absolutely gutted to not join us. So you'll have to tolerate my curiosities today, Neil. But you described there meeting Mark and that being part of your journey from opinion into knowledge into wisdom. Tell us more about that, because surely that doesn't happen automatically. Surely there's got to be some intentionality, some reflective practice in that to make that process work. I'm guessing you didn't just wake up one day and all of a sudden you're a master coach because you absorbed all your experiences. So how did you get to that stage of wisdom? What did you intentionally do to get yourself there? And along the way, how did you avoid confirmation bias? How did you avoid just going around in circles of reinforcing things you already knew?
If I'm true, I don't think I realized. I honestly believe it took, it's like emotional intelligence came into the foreground. Something that I'd never heard of, never been taught about. Through my classes, through our coaching theory classes, we study John Wooden. We follow his pyramid of success. Mm-hmm. And you start looking at the second layer of the pyramid of success: self-control, alertness, initiative, intent. They're all components of emotional intelligence, emotional control. And so he created that in 1948. This stuff wasn't around. You go into Caroline Dweck, growth mindset, emotional, all this stuff. It's this new research. And so one day I'm like studying him like 10, 12 years ago, and I'm thinking, this has got a connection with my journey. We talk about these phases, these research phases of from 18 to 30, you're very opinionated. You're very opinion based. 30 to sort of 42, 44, you're knowledge based. You're realizing, you're filtering, you're distilling maybe a lot of those opinions, and you're coming back and you're researching on those opinions. I kind of like this thought, this idea. I'm going to read a book. I'm going to listen to a podcast. I'm going to connect with another coach, or another coach is connected with me, and and questioned my opinion. What a great thing to do, because now you can come back on it and think through it and reflect back through it again, roll in emotional intelligence. And then you sort of, the ages 45 to 50 to 60, you've now got a little bit of wisdom. Now that wisdom is obviously very perceptive, because there's a lot of people above you with a lot more wisdom, but at least you can understand that the knowledge you have is working, and then you can sub-specialize into that. And I think you're talking about confirmation bias. I think that's when you come into this growth mindset, fixed mindset environment. And as generally as we get older, we get more fixed and specific to our roles and cynical and all the good things in life. But if we keep questioning ourselves and researching through ourselves and for ourselves, or we have other people critically analyzing our game, of which all my coaches, after every training session we have a full reflective session on it, a post-mortem on the training session of how can we be better? Where did we struggle? How can we grow? And suddenly someone might come out with a new idea or an adaptive idea in the flow. They're in the flow as much as the players are in the flow. And it's kind of like you're doing things you haven't planned, but it suddenly works, and you get the feedback off the player, or you get the feedback off yourself, and you think, let's transfer it, let's transition it, let's grow this out. How do we make this better? So I think the confirmation bias is reduced through sharing and listening to other people around you, or being vulnerable enough to listen to those people around you. And if you're ego based, then you're not going to want to know any of that stuff. And I think that's the struggle we come across is, I might be saying the courses at school and stuff, your ego is not your amigo. If you're going to take that on, coming from San Antonio, it kind of flows into the language.
Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, very Texan.
But, if you're not willing to listen or share, then you're not going to grow. But then the hardest part, I feel, is, yes, I've listened to my coaches. Now I have to plan to implement those thoughts in my next training session. Otherwise, it's just noise. If I'm just listening, yeah, that's great, this is good, I have to filter out again, maybe distill it. And how do I plan into my next training session for those ideas to grow and become bigger? That's kind of the thoughts we take.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, I connect with that on my own journey. I've been coaching 25 years or something like that. And in my 20s, I was very much acquiring technical, tactical knowledge. That's basically what I did. My learning as a coach was new concepts, new tactical concepts. What's that team over there? I remember mid 2000s being borderline obsessed with the Argentinian national team, senior men basketball team, because of the particular style of play that they ran. It was just a tactical game model that I was kind of obsessed with for a couple of years there, and then probably moved on to onto something else. And I wasn't aware of how I was learning. And if I could go back as a coach, I wouldn't change something technical, tactical I learned. I would actually go back and reflect on what process do I want to go through to acquire knowledge so that I can move from opinion to knowledge, and then what process am I going to go through to take myself then from that knowledge into wisdom. So just go into that helicopter view, that sort of meta view, looking down on how I learn as a coach. I wish I knew more about that in my younger years, because that's what speeds up our own learning, isn't it? It's not just about acquiring new bits of information. If we can speed up that cycle of learning, and I'm really interested in your concepts of filtering, distilling, and then the reflective sessions that you go through with your coaches, because you must be speeding up the development of those coaches through those reflective sessions if they're done in a particular way, right?
I'd like to think that's the purpose. Yeah. The reflective learning is one of the research-based is one of the fastest ways to retain knowledge and learn. Otherwise, we're in performance, and we can go out there and we can do what's necessary to achieve. And as a player, you're in performance, but as a coach, you're also in performance. But learning is guided by retention of knowledge. So if I can learn from that training session and I can retain that knowledge, And I think Mark does his covert recalls, doesn't he?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
the next day he'll start his training session with the previous session, but with no noise, or he'll put a field out there, but there'll be no noise nor direction. And he'll just sit, observe and review. Did they learn anything? And if they did, great, we can move forward. If we didn't, it was just performance. It was action in the moment. And so I feel that has a big area to it. And so if we talk about these reflective sessions and we discuss them afterwards, as I don't want the director of coaching, for want of a better word, it's a big term we have over here. Am I a director of coaching? Am I supporting the learning of my coaches? Am I a coaching developer or a coaching educator? Or am I just a senior coach? So now we've come up with these ideas. I have to be able to stand back. My coaches will go out in the field and do their training. I've got to stand back and review my coaches and watch my coaches. How are they implementing these ideas? How are they growing these ideas? Because my job as a coach developer is to develop coaches, not necessarily to develop players. Yes, we get that drug, don't we? That we want to go on there and coach players, and I still do that all the time. But then when we're in our academy sessions, I'm more focused on my coaches producing the quality for their players. And
So
if I can't empower them, then I'm struggling.
Yeah. So can you take me inside one of those reflection sessions? So it's post-practice, you're sitting down with a coach, maybe a couple of coaches, maybe the assistant coach as well. They've just finished coaching, or maybe it's the next day. They don't have much time, and neither do you. So you maybe you're sitting down for somewhere between 10 minutes and an hour. Like, what does that look like? What process do you go through? And specifically, can you give me examples of what questions you might ask?
Yeah, so we don't have much time, so we use our time wisely, and that time is used before the training session. So we have in my academy, Pass Academy, we have this course called Mindship that we work with coaches, we work with players, and so before the session we actually have what we call a pre-mortem, and the coaches will fill out exactly what they want the session to look like. What does success look like in the session? What are our sticky moments? What are our non-negotiable behaviors? Mark uses the language unacceptables, acceptables, and excellencies. I prefer to bring it into the language exceptionals. I prefer to bring it into the language of garbage, goods, and greats. Because
I like it.
a young 9-year-old really doesn't understand the word exceptional. They can perceive it, but they can't understand it often. The same with acceptable, because a non-negotiable is just the opposite. An unacceptable is the opposite of an acceptable to a younger person, but it's not really to a trained, seasoned coach. So we just go into garbage, goods, and greats. And often with the younger player, we don't want to put the negative mindset into them. So we'll just go with goods and greats. What will good look like, and how do we get this to great? So we'll do the same with the coaches. And then afterwards, they've done their pre-mortem for me. So now we'll reflect on that. So what was success for you this training session? Did you align to your success criteria? If you did, cool, we're bouncing. Where did you do that? So now we're putting that, the good reflective thoughts in the coach's head. We call it feeding the good wolf. You're making the good wolf hungry previously, and now you're filling them up so they're growing. And we'll reflect back on their pre-mortems. Now I can do that on the tailgate of the truck, and often it is. I mean, it's a great teaching tool. But then 24 hours later, I'll sit down, but give each one a call or a text, or roll through the ideas of their pre-mortem and how we can grow it out and build it out. So the simple questions was one I love at the bottom of them that we place on there was when we do it with the players, was the coach a positive or negative influence on your training today? And initially everything's a positive, but once they get to know you and you get to open up the vulnerability, they need to be able to tell us when we're not in the right place as well. And if we are, all right, what do I need to do for you as an individual person to make you a greater player? And if I can find that stuff out about you and I can get inside your game, then I can grow your game really, really quickly. Coaching the player, coaching the person and the player, I get the double whammy. If I just coach the player that turns up and leaves, I get 90 minutes. If I can coach the person first, and same with my coaches, if I can connect and grow my coaches inside the training session and outside the training session, I get to know about what presses their buttons, what they enjoy. So then I can connect the right player to the right. If we're doing personal training or something like that, I can connect the right player to the right person and get that chemistry growing a lot quicker than maybe trial and error, because we know our people. And it's what do we say? We manage objects and we lead people. So we want to be able to lead them as people.
That's really interesting. And that connects so well to the methodology that myself and my colleague Alan Keane use, which is to plan, do, review. Linking that to reflection, we're planning for action. We're planning for the action that's going to come. We're planning for the experiences we're about to have. And then do is about reflecting in action. So during a practice or a game, can I adjust my coaching based on what I'm noticing and observing? That's really hard. Like that's one of the hardest things to do in coaching, I think. And then the review is what you've described as reflecting on action. So your pre-mortem is, in my language, it'd be planning for action. And then your reflective session afterwards, that's reflecting on action afterwards. And then that feeds the next plan. That's where you can really escalate your coach. That's where you get to the next level, is when your review of your own coaching, not just of the players, your review of your own coaching then informs your next plan for action. So your plan gets better based on your last review, because now your success criteria that you mentioned earlier, if that success criteria is based on your last review, then you're really using I feel like that's where you're getting to that wisdom level, where a lot of coaches find that, in my experience, reviewing afterwards is really time consuming and hard to do. Sometimes it's even just a voice note after practice is the most a coach can do, especially volunteers, which most of us are. But in my experience, if you can start to reflect and review well on action, it makes your next plan so much easier. I save time on planning. The more time I invest in reviewing, the more time I save on planning, because my planning gets so much easier. I'm not just staring at a blank piece of paper so many coaches have that experience. They're driving to practice and they're like, what am I going to do with the kids today?
I would argue it doesn't make a next session. It makes your next session more successful. And if we're progressively building, we want that the progression of success. I mean, winning. What's important now? So it's not the win at the end. It's what's important now. What's important next. So if I grow that through, I would argue this reflection at the end of the session, it should be part of your planned time for the session. Yes, I've got a 90-minute session. No, it's a 90-minute session, 10-minute break, 10-minute review. And then I've got to ask these coaches, is it a can't do or is it a won't do? And if it's a won't do, then we've got to reflect back on our purpose and our reason for being there. If it's a can't do, then that's understandable. But I might dictate it on the way back on my phone through the car, or I might just take those. I mean, we sit on the front driveway and listen to the end of a song, don't we? We got Dexys Midnight Runners gassing it out there, and you know that you got to finish it off. So why can't we finish this off? And so that will come into me. But I really like your thoughts there on your methodology that you and Alan use. And so I've been listening to the last few episodes, podcasts, and you've been going through constraints, you've been going through these different progressive methods. And I think we go from this opinion to knowledge to wisdom growth phase. And we've been through it ourselves. And I teach this, I use this, but I don't solidly lean on one methodology. You've created your own. And I think that's that transition from knowledge to wisdom. And we have the same thing. We have our methodology is train it, test it, trust it. And so we'll train something, we'll put it under pressure, continual depth of pressure, progressive, incremental depths of pressure, test it, and then we'll stand back, observe, and trust it. And we got to trust it in the fact that the player are they a 7? Are they an 8? How are they measuring themselves? And yes, that's the big picture, train it, test it, trust it. But then even in the warm-up, I'm training the warm up. The macro picture is train it, test it, trust it. But then the micro picture is the same, is train it, test it, trust it. So each time we as a coach have a reflective process that we can go back to. Did I train it well enough? Why did she struggle in her success? Because I didn't test it properly under the right constraints or the right controls. A constraint seems to be an environmental standard. A control is a rule. Two touch only in soccer isn't a constraint. Two touch only is a rule. Because if you make three, then it's a free kick or whatever to the opposition, or a point to the opposition. But if you flex it into a standard, two if you can, three if you can't, now you've got an environmental constraint. So where do we, I think our whole idea in transformational coaching is to have less rules and more standards, because the standard can allow the play to play. Whereas if it's the rule, just like rugby, football, soccer, basketball, if you can't transition to the front court in 10 seconds, the rule is sideline ball or whatever it might be. But so the standards can allow the game to play. And I think that's an area of the constraints methodology that we got to understand. What's the difference between controls and constraints? And so we took all this together, brought it all in, and it's like, I like this from whole part whole, and I like this from the grow method, and I like this from progressive. Let's create our own. And I think that's where you gain your identity. All these clubs we go to, it's like, our methodology. And I go up to the coaches all the time. Hey, define your methodology to me. Help me understand it so I can learn from it. And it's not definable.
Okay. Hey, can you double click on constraint versus control? That's an aha moment there. 2 touches if you can, 3 if you can't. Can you go a bit further with that, or give me some more examples?
All right. So my world's soccer, obviously, but I'll try and throw it into basketball or other areas as well.
Translate it for me.
Yeah. So a control is, let's say we're playing a game and we know the game of basketball, and we know the opposition are really good at zonal defense and they're blocking out the key and all this kind of stuff really well. So we choose to say we've got to shoot from outside. We've got to take 3-point shots. So a control would be you can only take shots from outside the 3-point line. You can go in. Nobody's saying you can't go in the key. You can't do this, but you've got to go in to pass out.
Yep.
So you've got to clear space. So that would be a control. You're putting a control, a fixed rule on the game. And if you do shoot within the 3-point line, or you do run a layup, maybe your score goes back to 0 because you broke the control. Now your constraint might be we're struggling to get into the box, so now we're on a fast break attack in basketball. We've got to get in behind them, so we've got to score within 2 passes. We've got to get a basket within 15 seconds. So we'll put and if we don't, then you've got to reset your moment. We're not going to have a sideline ball or end line ball, but the whole idea to me of constraints are generally environmental. And when we talk about environmental, people think rain, wind, snow. No, it's a constraint might be playing basketball. I don't know about your gyms, but when I grew up in the military, we'd have hoops at either end of the gym and hoops across the gym. So we had vertical hoops and horizontal hoops. So an environmental, why not have 3 games running at the same time? Environmental constraint. You got end to end, and you might have 30 kids in your team in your training night. We all want them to play. So have 2 sets of 5 going end to end, 2 sets of 5 going across, 2 sets of 5 going across. And now we talk sticky moments. You talk environments where it's not going to be linear. Around that middle third of everybody's middle third, it's just going to be such a mess. And they've got to solve those problems. That's the environmental constraint creates a problem for people to solve. I think the control supports a tactical or a technical progression through the game. So these ideas can come in, but the controls are definitely rules. In my mind and my teaching, I'll teach you that controls are rules and constraints are environmental areas, or take it out of a 10 by 10 to a 15 by 15, or have a 3v2, start with a 3v1, then a 3v2, then a 3v3, then a 4v3. So again, train it, test it, trust it. If I'm starting on a 3v1, it's a pretty easy model to coach. If I'm going to a 3v2, I've added pressure. So I've trained it. I'm now testing it under pressure. And now I've got to trust it, go to a 3v3. Why not? But then if I want to really take it outside the box, I'm going to put a 4v3 in there and overload the opportunities, the decisions, the speed, etc. of the other side, and stand back and observe and see who leads, see who solves the problems.
That's fantastic, Neil. That's a concept and a clarification that I think coaches can take with them into their coaching straight away, a constraint versus a control. I've never heard that distinction, so thank you for that. You also mentioned, I think, some different methodologies or ways of organizing a practice. So you got whole, part, whole, you got progression, and then you talk grow. Is that the right language? Can you overview those?
So whole, part, whole. It's a very basic system to teach, and I think our brain teaches it without us actually knowing it. But often we'll go into whole, part, whole. And people will use it over here. They call it play, practice, play. People redefine it in their own way. But if I'm taking possession on, I'm going to play a whole game in possession. Just maybe 6 passes equals a point, or 3 passes equals a point, whatever it might be. And then I'm going to break it down. So I'll play the whole game, simple, and then I'll break down the actual technical basis of the pass. So if it's in basketball, I'm extending the fingers towards the player. If it's in soccer, I'm drawing a ball line, I'm putting my plant foot on the ball line, I'm passing the ball to connect with the other player's attacking foot or defensive foot, whichever the environment tells me. So I'll break it down into parts. And I generally teach the technical parts. And then the whole at the end, I'll put it back into the game. And now it's my opportunity to stand back as a coach and observe, am I seeing the teaching phase or the learning phase of the part in the final whole? Who's reinforcing it? Who's influencing it? Who's ignoring it? If I'm teaching the bounce pass in basketball, there's a particular reason for that. So in the final game, I might put a constraint on the final game that enforces a bounce pass. And then are the players actually now transferring, like I said earlier, performance to learning? Are they transferring that in the game? And generally that would be all based on incremental performance. But the whole methodology sits like that. And it's how our brain works. We see something, we break it down into its parts, and then we see the whole thing again. Does it come back together, a jigsaw?
Yeah, so that's been my go-to methodology whenever I'm not sure what to do, because I'm a community coach. I coach serious amateurs, people that are committed to the game, but they're very few of them are going to go on to scholarships or professional basketball, 1 or 2, but that's the most. So it's people who love the game, want to get better, they're serious about it, but they've got lives outside of my coaching.
We all,
yeah. So whole, part, whole was often my go-to practice format, because the whole means that people who are there for fun and to connect with each other, they get to play a game early on in the training session. And somebody told, a great guy I used to work with, told me something when he was very early in my coaching career. He said, kids remember the beginning and the end. And that fits with whole, part, whole so well if you're coaching kids. I mean, any age it works with, but particularly kids, they remember the beginning and the end. So whole, part, whole fits with that. And then later on, when I was exposed to ideas like covert recall, so, actually, whole, part, whole fits brilliantly with that, because you can use obviously the whole at the beginning for covert recall. And then when I got into things like reflecting in action, so adjusting my training session as I was going along, whole, part, whole worked with that as well. So I would have when I've been at my best, I've got my practice format, I've got my plan, I watch the whole at the beginning, and then I adjust or change aspects of the part, the middle bits of practice, based on what I saw. So I'm adjusting my practice plan as I'm going along. So I found that to be a brilliant method, but it's obviously not the only one. So can you continue on to grow?
Yeah, so I mean, there's lots there that we do, and constraints is part of one, behaviors is another, just teaching through behaviors. But the grow model, it's kind of a goal-orientated model. Again, it's very theory-based, and you have to place it into your training system and how you want to apply it. But the grow is goal based, then the reality of what's happening, then the GRO is options, the options you have to change, the options you have to use interventions, and then the W is the will. And the will is how you commit, how you specify areas, how you grow. You've seen things happening in the session. What are you actually going to grow from the session? So you're going to take your goals. What are my goals of the session? Pre-theory, kind of pre-mortem kind of things. And then the reality of which is where you're going to use your resources, the environment, all these kind of things will come into your planning. And then as your options, it's what am I looking to discover from this training session? And then the will becomes the commitment of the players. We're here now. Are we ready to move? Again, a mark, we're here now. Are we ready to move on? And I see a lot of the grow model in Mark's training, but it's a real theory, practical model, but not necessarily an on-field model. And this is where all these methodologies are wonderful, aren't they? But often they just don't transfer from paper to grass. And that's your craft as a coach. You've planned it, and then what happens? You planned it for 12 and only 8 turn up. And all your little systems have gone. So now, how do you adapt in the flow? How do you roll in the flow? And your plan might need to be reevaluated. And I think that's where you can come in, like you say, you've got your banker, you dropped a whole part hole, or you dropped to your 2v2 counter attack, or whatever it might be. And I think that's our craft as a coach. And then our emotional intelligence comes in, our composure, not to get flustered by it. This happened. We're going to get a red card. We're going to get a yellow card in the game. If we've planned for it, then that's cool. But if I haven't planned for it, now it's a surprise that's going to take me outside of my control areas or my emotional control or my status, and now I'm in trouble. I think, opinion, knowledge, wisdom. As this experience builds, I mean, I didn't even come into the podcast thinking about that, but you made me really come through it and start advancing it even more. So,
I'm really fascinated by a reflection in action. So when you're doing, how do you adjust your coaching as you go? Because it can feel like the antithesis to planning. Because if we plan, we've got our success criteria, we know what our targets are. That's different to a plan, which is a list of drills and games that I'm going to do in this practice session. And my observation that those are quite different. Those are quite different ways of planning. I see a lot of coaches with a notebook and they've written out a list of drills, or you see professional coaches and they've got time to prepare, but what they prepare is a Word file, and it's a list. Again, it's a list of games or drills with technical points, and we're going to do this for 3 minutes, and then we're going to do that for 14 minutes. Then we're going to have a drinks break for 24 seconds. Then we're going to move on to the next thing. And if that's the extent of our planning, then we don't build in the capacity to reflect in action and adjust it as we're going, which is what I do really like about constraints and about small-sided games, is I can plan to play 4v4. But prior to that, so that's in my part. So if I'm doing whole part whole, for example, I can play a game 5-on-5 or whatever. It might be some constraints, or you want everybody playing at the beginning. So in basketball, you might play 2 half-court games so that everybody's involved. Or football, soccer, you might go cross pitch so that you got 2 games going on at once, so everyone's playing. And then my part is I'm going to play 4v4. After that, I'm going to break down something. But based on what I saw in those initial games, I was going to work on passing, because I thought that was going to be the next progression based on our review. But it turns out that our positioning in those games was not good at the beginning. And that's connected to, the last game, our positioning wasn't very well. So now I can stick to my plan, which is to play 4v4. But instead of putting a constraint in based on passing, just you have to throw a number, or it might be a control. You have to throw 5 passes in basketball before you can shoot. I might now completely shift the constraint or the control to now where you have to get a player in each corner of the court before you can shoot. You have to fill the corner in each time. So that's about positioning. So it's the same activity, but I've pivoted from a passing constraint to a spacing or positioning constraint because I've reflected in action. Like when I'm at my best as a coach, I'm able to do that. When I'm at my worst, or I'm tired, or I'm a bit rigid, or my state is not good, I'm frustrated, then that pivot becomes much harder.
I think
that's not a question, Neil, but
no.
What's your reflections on that?
I'm hearing it as a question. I'm hearing it as a statement, both. Mm-hmm. And I'm into my head, I'm getting transactional versus transformational. Okay. And I'm getting you're transacting in your own head because you're seeing something. You spoke about confirmation bias previously. You're seeing something that you want to see cognitively that you didn't think you would see, and now you're seeing how you can correct it. The writing reflex, how you can suddenly correct it. And in that, I've got to ask myself, step back and ask myself, why am I practicing passing in this training session? Chances are I'm practicing passing in this training session because we're not good at passing the ball under pressure. So my whole training session is designed for passing the ball under pressure. But now I've had this confirmation bias because my eyes have seen a couple of distractions somewhere. And now I'm thinking, well, it's not passing, it's positioning. But even if I put them in different positions, chances are I still can't pass the ball. So I think we have to come in with our purpose. We have the purpose for a reason. And if I'm not shooting well enough, I need a finishing practice, a shooting finishing practice. And I can evolve it through the practice, but it's like the Pareto principle, the 80-20 principle. I'm going to get 80% of my outcomes from 20% of my income. So 80% of my performance is going to come from 20% of my actions. So I've got to stick to my guns on where I am, but I can adapt my methods through the session. Now, I say that in the fact that we spoke earlier about the progression of the session and how do we get success at the end. We get success at the end often by removing anxiety at the beginning. And this happens especially with girls. If I take my training session and I tell the girls that I'm training tonight, I'm going to tell the girls exactly where we're going. And I'm going to say, we're going to start with this activation warm-up. We have a thing called hoops, which is kind of cool, really. We're going to start with this activation warm-up. We're going to hit hoops. We're then going to go into pressured mastery. We're then going to go into 1v1 confirmation under pressure, under more pressure. We're then going to go to 2v2. We're then going to finish the whole session in a 4v4 game. So nothing's a fear to them. They've seen the beginning, and we call it the final whistle. Start with the final whistle. They've seen the end. And so as we progress through, they know that at this point, there's going to be a little water break. They can go and do whatever. So there's no fear. There's no saying, I'm going to throw something new in. Now, I might say at the beginning, I've got this great new idea to create a W formation in the middle of the field. We're going to start shadow playing it. We're going to another methodology we can use. We're going to go through shadow play. We're going to work through this in a really passive environment. And it might feel a little bit boring. So I'm already auditing them to this breather phase of shadow play. And they coach, we just want to play. And I go, yep, we will. But we got 5 minutes just to define and describe the walkthrough, talk through of the actions that we're in. So nothing's a surprise to them. And then at the end, I love what you're saying. They get to play. We always remember the last thing we did. And so going to the car, I scored this amazing goal. I had 3 shots on goal. They don't remember the suicide shuttles that they were doing at the 10-minute point because they just remember that final section. And I think we have these transactions in our head as well as transactions with our players. But if we have this emotional intelligence phase, we can work it and we can have this as transformational. And that's basically what I'm trying to teach in all my classes. It's you plus me that makes a better solution. A transactional coach is you versus me to my solution. And if I can, as one, I can grow the team. Me and you coaches, we're part of the team. Parents, part of the team. How do I grow that together to then make culture, and then we go for all those directions? So,
I could talk to you all day. I'm conscious that coaches listening to this are on their dog walk or they're driving to practice right now. They don't have much time. So let's get into let's do a little review here of our podcast. Let's little rapid fire. Let's exchange tips here. In this section, you can repeat something you've said earlier, because this is the bit where the coaches like that are listening, just listen in for this next 5 or 6 minutes. This is going to be all the nuggets. So can I ask you to go first? And this, I've never done this before, but can I actually ask you to repeat something you said earlier, because it's great. Train it, test it, trust it. Explain that to the listeners.
So this is our methodology that we teach through. And we train something, we then test it under pressure. It's like, Mark would understand this, you might not understand. Well, yeah, you're going to understand this, of course you are. I put a tea bag in cold water, the water remains clear and cold. I put a tea bag in boiling water in the kettle, and it has to, we both know it has to be boiling, doesn't it? And now I get the cup of tea, I get the diffusion of all the flavors, I get the diffusion of the colors, I get the smells, because I put that bag under pressure.
Yeah.
And like Eddie Jones talks about this in his rugby coaching and stuff. So we train it, we teach it in a semi-passive environment, or even a fully passive environment maybe. And then we'll start to test it. And then what we'll do, once they've got it and they've got the flow and they've got the ideas, we as coaches are now going to trust it. And chances are when I do that, if I'm playing 6v6, I'm really playing 7v7, because I have a player on either side of me that I'm talking to. And I'm asking them, what's going to happen now? Where can we improve this? How can we grow this? And they'll give me an answer, and it's like high five, slap on the back, go and touch the player on the far side, number 6, bring him off, go and replace him. I'm watching you for the next 3, 4, 5 minutes, solely to put your thoughts and your ideas into the field, growing, empowering leadership. And that's the trust it phase. So the trust it phase comes from masses of observation, but you're just tweaking and moving little parts around, but you're not affecting the game at all. Oh, sorry. You're not coaching, verbally coaching into the game. You're just making your tweaks as you might in a real game. So you're also now testing yourself.
Great.
And within these train it, test it, trust it, we have little micro train it, test it, trust it. And it's just where all these methodologies that we use evolve in. And one day it might be one bigger than another, but it kind of really, really works well for us.
Great. Thanks, Neil. That's something that coaches can do in their next practice. Train it, test it, trust it. If you got that at the back of your mind as you're designing and implementing your session, I think that'll make for a better practice. Okay, my tip. We talked a little earlier about the reflection session. My reflection and review methodology is based on something I read that nurses do when they're on the move in hospitals quickly. When they need to review really quickly, they ask 3 questions: what, so what, and now what? So what happened? Okay, let's develop a quick shared understanding of what just happened. So what? So what can we learn from that? What are the implications of what just happened? Now what? Okay, what have we got to do next with the next patient, or the next time I go in and see that patient again on my next round, I'm going to do this slightly differently. So what, so what, now what? That's my reflection methodology. It's so quick. And if you're time poor as a coach and you feel like you can't review, apply that methodology, and it'll give you a little bit of structure and speed up that reflection process. Okay, your turn, Neil. You got another tip to offer the coaches?
I'd add on to the background of yours. I spoke about we can't control wins, can we? We can't control wins and losses. However, we can control how we define win. And we define win. There's a conference recently, and you're reading the books and all this kind of stuff, and the nuggets come out, don't they? And this one gentleman I'm working with, it's what's important now, what's important next. So I want the win. So my mindset is on win. My mindset is on win. I'm positively moving forward. I'm playing off the front foot. What's important now? Is it to stand back and just let them play? Have I been too controlling? Let them play. Just give the game back to them. That's what it's all about. What's important next? Tweak here, tweak there, maybe. Or what's important now? Reinforce your coaching points. What's important now? Catch them being good. What's important now? So catch them being good. What's important next? I need someone on the team to catch somebody being good. So we continually have this progressive system in there. And I think that flows quite nicely into your nurses one.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. Um, I want to share with coaches a tip around observation and noticing, because you've described a lot of nuance in how you could run a practice session, just constraints versus control. And so for a coach who's looking to implement that, my tip is so simple. It's to move and listen. This really changed my coaching. I found myself staying in the same spot, often next to my assistant coach at the halfway line, as we talk about basketball more than we actually coach basketball. But when I started moving, particularly in the far corner, I really like being in the corner of a basketball court, and because I can look through the game. That's if I'm playing two small-sided games one at each end, I can look through the current group that's in front of me, and I can watch the group in the background as well. So moving away from that middle area where you've inevitably got blind spots because you're looking left and right or you can't see behind you, and positioning yourself often in the corner and looking through the activity in front of you, and watching the activity furthest away from you at the same time, lets you do a little bit of covert recall, but you can quickly adjust because you can change your visual focus to what's in front of you very, very quickly. And so moving back and forth between those focus areas really changed what I noticed in a practice session. Right, over to you, Neil. Last tip. What's something you want to leave the coaches with? What's some nuggets or something you want to re-emphasize for the coaches?
I'd kind of like to leave with this if I can. We're very much we do a lot of empowerment. We empower others so that they can find their own success. And we find you're going to talk about awareness there and things. As players in the high school environment, they want to go and play in college and all these kind of areas, or they want to go from JV to varsity high school players, or even coaches as well. Coaches are coming up there in our world, they're coming up their licenses or other areas of qualification. We have a course called Mindship, which is mindset and leadership. And we grow and focus the empowerment of the player to understand their identity, their role within the game, how to grow their role personally, how to self-reflect on themselves personally, and have systems and tools to cure the areas where they struggle, their sticky moments. And then we produce it into the leadership environment of how they influence others. They've got all these concerns on the fields that are worrying them and giving them anxiety, but we've got to give them the tools that they can influence those concerns, but control what they can control. And it's a course we call Mindship. And we teach it online. We teach it in person a lot. We do it at the level of the player. We do it at the level of the coach. And I feel it's something that we've started to do that's taking almost 3 months of a university course into 6 one-hour sessions of this Mindship course. But because the players want to learn, the coaches have this willingness to learn, it really transfers well. And I feel if we do focus as coaches, we leave here and we focus on our players, not their X's and O's. Let them fall there. Let them grow there. Because if you fall, you're going to stand up. If you fail, you might not ever get up. So we call it falling and not failing. But I feel everything's created twice. And if it's first of all, it's created in the mind, then it's created in the body. If we don't support the creation in the mind, we're never going to get the creation in the body, or there's going to be self-doubt, questioning, etc. Efficacy comes in the equation as we go through. So we run this Mindship course, and it really kind of works well. That's sort of what I'd like to leave coaches with.
Thank you, Neil. And you've left us another nugget there at the end there, fall, not fail. I really like that, because you can get up from a fall, much harder to get up from a failure. Hey, before we go, how can people contact you? What's your website URL or email, or how would you like people to get in touch?
Great. I'm in the States. I'm in San Antonio, but we work all over the world pretty much. My website is www.pass1on1.com. The number one on the number one.com. My email is Neil, Neil, Hull, HULL, @pass1on1.com. And then we're on Instagram at pass_academy. And we're on Facebook at Pass Academy, I think. There you go.
You're doing well
there, didn't you?
I know you're
me. I
doing
wasn't
well
expecting to
there.
sell myself.
I couldn't recite our handles. Maybe I need to get better at that. A podcast host should be able to rattle those off very quickly. Look, Neil, like I said earlier, I could have talked all day, and I think maybe in a few months' time we're going to have to get you back to double click on some of these concepts as well. I know Mark will want to quiz you as well at some point in the future. So all I can say to finish is just thank you very much. Thanks for your insight, your openness, and for sharing with our listeners.
Thank you, guys. What you do is extremely important. If I hadn't have found Mark, I don't think I'd have found myself in certain places either. I'm very grateful for that. And it's been emotional, hasn't it? Cheers.
Thanks, Neil.